Everybody, and welcome to this video which covers the modal model of memory as part of the cognitive psychology topic for Stage 1 psychology. Let's get started. So the modal model of memory is a theoretical structure of human memory, including the sensory register, short-term memory store, and long-term memory store. So really this model is the most agreed upon way or model in which the human mind works in terms of processing memory and how memory works. So the modal model of memory uses stages from the information processing model, which I've discussed in a previous video, but defines three different memory stores with distinct properties. So the main pioneers in this area was Atkinson and Shiffrin, and they proposed the three-stage model in 1968, which has since been developed by psychologists into the model presented here. I should also mention at this point, sometimes this is referred to as the multi-store model of memory. Both are correct. So as you can see here, we have the sensory memory, the short-term memory, and long-term memory stores. So let's look at these in more detail. So looking at the model up close, we can see here that we look at the incoming information that's part of the information processing model. It first hits our sensory memory and unattended information is immediately lost. So unattended meaning information we deem as not important. If attention is paid, it is then transferred to our short-term memory, where unrehearsed information is lost very quickly. However, if rehearsal is done, then it can be encoded into our long-term memory. Now, even though that may be the case, some information may still be lost over time, as we know. But as long as we are paying attention and there is rehearsal of information, it should encode into our long-term memory, ready for retrieval back into our short-term memory when we need it. So let's start with the sensory register part of the model. So this is the first stage wherein attention is paid to specific incoming sensory information. So we already know that we experience 5 basic senses, plus others that give us information, as we can see here. So we've got the balance sense as well. But it's too overwhelming to pay attention to all of the sensory stimuli all at once. So we wouldn't be able to function. So we only pay attention to that which is deemed as important. Now this must occur within a few seconds or the information is lost. So the sensory register temporarily stores holding information from the environment very, very briefly in the form in which it is received. So whether it's visually, orally, etc. So information needs to receive attention if it is going to begin the process of being transferred into long-term memory. So the main variable that affects memory recall at this part of the modal model is whether we pay attention to the information or not, and that is the sensory register's job. So moving on to short-term memory, this is the second stage of the modal model, where information is encoded using previously remembered information. Now, we know from class that short-term memory can hold about 7 pieces of information, give or take 2 items. So we've talked about the magic number 7 several times. Usually that information is held for between 15 to 30 seconds. So this is a large capacity, but the information is easily lost to prevent the mind from overload. So information will be lost, or we will forget, in other words, very quickly, unless we actually rehearse the information. So if the information in the short-term memory is rehearsed, then it can move to long-term memory store. So if it's not rehearsed, or if more information disrupts this rehearsal, then the information in the store may be displaced and lost. I'll talk about displacement theory in a separate video. So when we recall something, it's retrieved from long-term memory and enters our short-term memory so that decisions can be made and problems can be solved. Okay, so looking at magic number 7, still within short-term memory store. So research on the short-term memory started as early as 1887, when Joseph Jacobs created a digit span test. This is similar to the ones that we've done in class. So he asked people to recall a string of numbers increasing by 1 each time until no more could be remembered. So he found, along with other research since then, that an average of 7 digits were able to be recalled accurately. So Miller introduced the idea of chunks of information and added that we could remember 2 less than or 2 more than 7 of these in our short-term memory. This is, of course, on average. Still sticking with short-term memory, I've already talked about the importance of rehearsal. If we don't rehearse the information, it won't be able to be transferred to long-term memory. So rehearsal of information strengthens the neural networks, making content easier to recall later. So there's two types of rehearsal. There's maintenance rehearsal, which is repeating the information over and over again to yourself, either verbally or in your head. There's also elaborative rehearsal. So this means reorganizing new information in a meaningful way. So for example, creating nursery rhymes or creating rhymes or visual images, etc. So we elaborate on the information that's in our heads already. So both rehearsal techniques are used as methods of encoding information from short-term memory store to move into long-term memory store. So in 1959, Peterson conducted an experiment to test short-term memory duration when rehearsal of the information was prevented. So they asked participants with trigrams, as you can see here, to recall, then asked them to count backwards by 3s or 4s. So this is known as a distractor task and aimed to prevent the participants from repeating the trigrams over and over again. They then tested participant recall at different time intervals and found the results shown in the graph here. So after only 18 seconds, correct recall had declined to less than 10%. But when rehearsal is not prevented, Atkinson and Schifrin in 1971 proposed that the duration of the short-term memory could extend as long as 30 seconds. So it only emphasized the importance of rehearsal. So the final stage is long-term memory. So this is the third stage of the modal model, where information that is important is stored over a long period of time. It has unlimited capacity. However, information can fade over time if it's not rehearsed frequently. So the way memory is encoded also impacts its longevity, along with emotional and motivational factors. So there's other variables, in other words, that can affect how the memory is encoded in terms of its accuracy. So here is a really good summary table. So looking at the sensory register capacity, it depends on our selective attention. The duration is only a few seconds, and it registers raw or sensory information. The short-term memory store, on average, will store 7 pieces of information, give or take 2. It varies from 15 to 30 seconds in terms of duration, but can increase with rehearsal. And it receives information from the sensory register and encodes it into long-term memory. Now, the long-term memory is limitless in terms of its capacity. It's also limitless in terms of duration, as long as it's aided by rehearsal, otherwise it can be lost. And it stores a huge amount of information over a long period of time and aids in our learning. So I hope you found this video useful. As always, if you've got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, happy revising.